And our special guest star this week is Kristofferson. Kris, welcome to our show.
Good to be back, Ralph.
Kris, you're in Nashville to do a tribute to Hank Williams, aren't you?
Right, we're doing it tonight, I think. It's, I think, Brenda Lee and Waylon and Ray Price and a whole bunch of people are on it. Looks like a pretty good show.
Did you ever know Hank Williams?
Well, he was my hero. First time I ever heard him was on the Opry, and he was singing Lovesick Blues, and it was, he got like 5 encores or something. I'd never even heard of him.
Where were you?
I was in California, and I hadn't been listening to the Opry a while, you know, and I didn't know who he was, and all of a sudden here's this guy singing like I'd never heard before, the Lovesick Blues. Imagine the first time you ever heard it. And they kept bringing him back for more. He was about to go off on the road somewhere. And I bought every 78 he had after that. I didn't even ask what it was. I just say, you got any Hank Williams records?
So you became a genuine fan.
Oh, I'd have to say I was a fan before anybody in California anyway was. But unfortunately, I couldn't yodel, and that was one of my first big heartbreaks.
So you couldn't do Lovesick Blues?
Couldn't do Lovesick Blues, Long Gone Lonesome Blues, or many of the ones that. In fact, one of the ones I'm doing tonight with Hank Jr., he's got to do the little yodel at the end of Nobody's Lonesome for Me, and I just kind of move my lips.
Me and Bobby McGee, but I want you to tell me a little bit about the song. I was talking to Fred Foster the other day of Monument Records, and he told me about a girl named Bobby McGee who had inspired the idea.
Well, she was, I think she was Boodle Bryant's secretary downstairs from Fred's office, and Fred called me up at Combine and said he had a song title for me. Said it was me and Bobby McGee, but I thought he said McGee because I was a little drunk at the time. And he says Bobby McGee is a she, and he says let's write a song, write a song on the thing. And I went off and hid from him for about 3 months, because it's hard for me to write a thing on an assignment. But the odd thing about that is that I just, as late as our gig in Tahoe a couple of days ago, got word from a guy who said he had lived with me and also with the Bobby McGee, and wanted to talk to me about it. I've had about 15 people claim to be the original Bobby McGee. When Willie and I were jogging in Hawaii before our gig over there, we ran past a restaurant called the original Bobby McGee, and he said there's a chain of them in the Southwest called Me and Bobby McGee restaurants. And it should have been McKee, but it never was.
Do you get a cut of the hamburgers or whatever?
They don't even give me the French fries.
You were busted flat in Baton Rouge. Now, I remember you used to fly helicopters. We'd see you around Nashville, and then we wouldn't see you for a while.
Yeah.
And you were flying helicopters to the oil rigs in the Gulf of Mexico, weren't you?
Right. That was after the time that I was working with Columbia and all that, when you were putting me on the TV show there in the afternoon. But then I'd work a week in the Gulf and come back here for a week. I remember several times bothering you all night long during that time back here.
What? Apparently you would augment your income then by flying the helicopters for a while and then come back to Nashville.
Oh, yeah. Well, I didn't augment it. That was my income. I wasn't making any in Nashville, but I felt staying in the business by coming back here every other week.
Busted flat in Baton Rouge. Was that accurate?
I was flying in Baton Rouge at the time. I had been busted all over the South, but I meant broke at the time, and I don't guess it was accurate because I was flying when I wrote it, but it was supposed to be something in the past. I remember that was the part that started the song off in my head, though, was I'm busted flat in Baton Rouge, heading for the trains, feeling nearly faded as my jeans. That came out right away, and then the rest of it, I just had to think about it, and it would come slowly.
Kris, what's Barbra Streisand like?
She likes Chinese food? No. How long do we have? She's a perfectionist. She's intelligent. She can be a real terror to work with sometimes.
Was she tough on you?
Yeah, I think she was. But I was tough on her at the same time in a different way. I think she was going for the best performance, and after seeing what she did with the film, you know, I have come to feel indebted to her. You know, I think whatever went down between us, you know, as far as tension, she was doing it for a reason, for the film. I would hope that in the future she'd have enough. I think we came out with enough mutual respect where she would tell me that she was the director rather than just sort of pretend she wasn't. But we're friends now.
Are you going to make another picture together?
Well, she said something about it, you know, like it's off in the future or something, and a friend of hers mentioned the possibility.
I want to go back to your music and talk about Help Me Make It Through the Night. I seem to recall a conversation we had years ago, and we discussed an article by Frank Sinatra.
Mm-hmm.
And it was in Esquire or one of those magazines, Playboy perhaps.
Or Time magazine, I'm not sure what it was in.
Where he said he believed in a bottle of whiskey or a Bible or anything that would help you make it through the night.
I believe he said abroad. He didn't say a Bible. Yeah, but anything that help you make it through the night. That's where.
Is that where the idea came from?
Yeah, I believe. I know the phrase itself came from that. It was. I was writing the song out in the Gulf of Mexico, you know, on that platform that I worked on, and had got all the, you know, the first part about take the ribbon from your hair and shake it loose, let it fall, and all that, and the tune. But I didn't have a title, and then that thing that Frank Sinatra said occurred to me, and so I hope he doesn't demand half the copyright of it. He later cut a song of mine that Nobody Wins.
That's right, he did. I'd forgotten about that.
That was a landmark.
I think, as I recall, you know, some of your copyrights are immortal. Me and Bobby McGee, Help Me Make It Through the Night, For the Good Times. As I recall, Kris, in looking back, Help Me Make It Through the Night was first recorded by Ray Price. Is that correct?
Well, actually, it was first recorded by Gene Nash, not Gene Nash, Bill Nash, by Jerry Kennedy, same guy that cut For the Good Times first. But
who has been lost somewhere.
Well, they put out For the Good Times, and nobody would play it, I think, except one station because of the line, hold your warm, tender body close to mine. And Bill was a good singer. So he then cut Help Me Make It Through the Night, and they dropped him off the label and never released it. But then I think Ray did cut it. Either Ray or Waylon was going to cut it, and they both kind of got into a standoff. You know how Waylon can get sometimes. Well, hell, if you're going to do it, Hoss, I ain't going to do it. And then and the next thing you know, Sammy slipped in between them with a single.
Well, Ray had it in an LP, as I recall.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Up tempo.
Yeah.
And Sammy had it in an LP, Sammy Smith, and they pulled it out, and her version became a hit. Yeah. And along about that time, I kept hearing that Johnny Cash was going to do it. But I don't suppose he ever did that song.
Well, I couldn't tell you. I don't think he ever did. I remember Waylon was going to, unless he got mad because I give it to somebody else, and then he didn't. But Waylon probably listens to more songs than most artists do, you know.
Of course, Waylon did The Taker.
He did The Taker. He did.
He said, Kris said I changed his song.
He wasn't very worried about it, though. But the way he changed it was the right way it should have been. He made it sound like a Mexican song, and that's the way I cut it later when I recorded it for that Silver Tongue Devil album.
Kris, I remember some of the things, but I don't remember them all specifically. When you were in Nashville, legend says that you were cleaning the ashtrays at the Columbia Recording Studio, which is right across the street from where we are right now. And you worked over there sort of as a handyman.
It was called Studio Setup. Studio Setup Man, I think it was. It was a janitor's job. I cleaned the studio up and kept the engineer's supply of tape and stuff like that. Saw a lot of sessions.
Is that how you met people like Johnny Cash?
Yeah, that's how I met John. And I didn't get a lot of songs cut, but
Is that the reason you took that job, so that you could pitch your songs?
Not to pitch them, but to I needed to earn some money just to feed my wife and kid, and I didn't want to take a job that took me completely away from Music Row, you know. So I figured it was the perfect job for a songwriter. I didn't have to think.
What does that mean?
Well, I mean, it doesn't take a whole lot of brains to do what I was doing, so I could be writing songs all day long.
Oh,
and also getting to know various artists. It didn't turn out to be a good vehicle for pitching songs because I think people come to regard me as the janitor. You know, you're not going to go take your. I'd go down to Harlan Howard's house rather than go to the janitor to get my songs if I was coming in town to do a session. But I built some, you know, like lasting friendships with people like John and June and a lot of them from over there.
Wasn't this a big come down, a very humbling experience, because you had a career in the Army, you were an officer, you were a Rhodes Scholar, and now you were emptying ashtrays?
It wasn't for me so much because I was so excited about writing at the time. You know, you remember when heck, you plugged the first song that I ever had recorded. Remember the old Vietnam Blues?
Vietnam Blues.
And I went up to you and thanked you for saying nice things about it or something. You looked at me like I was crazy. But it was hard on the rest of them. It was hard on people who were used to being married to a captain or something, or whose son was going to be an instructor or something, you know, and because they weren't as excited about the business as I was.
Well, wasn't your father an officer?
He was a major general in the Air Force.
That's pretty heavy.
Pretty heavy.
Major General Kristofferson?
Yeah, he was. Well, he was actually in the reserve. He was just on active duty during the wars in the Second World War in Korea. But he was also an airline pilot and worked for. Actually, the last job he had was out in Arabia, which is pretty hot right now, working for Aramco.
Is he still living?
Years. No, he died a few years back. Fortunately, after I started making a living.
Well, I wondered if he ever forgave you. Because,
oh, yeah.
Huh?
Oh, yeah. In fact, I got a letter where he wrote and asked me to forgive him.
I see.
He said nobody could have ever told him not to be a pilot when he wanted to be one, and he really felt like he was wrong for trying to tell me what to do.
But didn't he weren't you going to be an instructor at West Point at one time?
Oh, that was my next assignment. When I was coming back from Germany from my 3-year tour over there when I came to Nashville, and had I not gotten out of the Army, I would have gone to West Point and taught English literature or something. And I'm sure it was disappointing to my family when I decided not to do that. But they're reconciled to it.
Kris, was there ever any reference to the term hillbilly? Our boys down there with all those hillbillies in Nashville?
I'm sure that was a big part of it. Because the image of Nashville at the time, well, you know, people in Nashville didn't even admit they went to the Opry back in those days.
Right.
And you didn't have the mayor turning the first spade of earth on some new Music City construction or anything. The town of Nashville was even kind of schizophrenic about the business, you know, and I'm sure they thought I was in the hillbilly capital of the United States, but heck, my mother's the biggest country fan in the world now. I think she calls up and disguises her voice and requests my records and stuff like that. And she's come to really respect Johnny Cash and June Carter, people like that who before I think they thought they were not ignorant necessarily, but definitely a style of life that they didn't want to know anything about.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I think just like the whole public has come to look a little differently at country music and Nashville since then.
Kris, when you left college, I'm trying to tie up a loose end here. How do we get from college to the Army?
Okay, I went from college in the States to Oxford for a couple of years to on the Rhodes Scholarship, and after Oxford, I went into the Army. I was in ROTC in college here, so I was commissioned actually when I graduated, and then they deferred it for my graduate work. And so I went into the Army in 60, I believe. 60, yeah, or 61. And went through the schools, you know, Ranger School and Jump School and Flight School for about a year and a half, and then I did a 3-year tour in Germany, and came back here right before the buildup in Vietnam, because they were just asking for volunteers as my tour was running out in Germany. And I was the only guy in the unit that was crazy enough. I volunteered to go over there. Thank God they turned it down. And turned out it was because the assignment at West Point had priority. I eventually didn't take that either. I came to Nashville instead, but that was in the summer of '65.
There had to be a turning point in your life when you finally said to yourself, I'm going to Nashville. I'm really going to do it.
Uh-huh.
You recall that time?
Well, it was over in Germany. I had a little band. Most of them were enlisted men, and we'd play at the Rod and Gun Club, you know, and the NCO clubs and the EM clubs, and didn't make any money. You know, $50 they'd pay us. They wouldn't even pay for gas. But there was a guy in the unit that I was in who was also a helicopter pilot who was a relative, I think, of Mary John Wilkin, and he sent her some of my tapes. God, we waited for the word to come back, you know, and it never did. And just before I left to come back to go to see West Point, you know, she sent a letter, and just at the bottom of it, she said, tell Kris to, if he's ever in Nashville, to drop by. I'm sure she just said it to be nice, you know. But that was all I needed, and I arrived in uniform, you know, and decided to be a writer for him.
What was your rank in the Army?
Captain, when I got out.
What part of the Army were you in?
I was an infantry officer, but I was in Army aviation, flying helicopters.
So that's where you learned to fly the helicopters, I guess.
Yeah. In fact, I even flew in the Guard a while here in Nashville. That's how I flew that old helicopter out to Johnny Cash's house.
Tell me about that. Tell us that story. I've heard various accounts of that.
Yeah, well, it always changes a little depending on who's telling it. But what it really was I would be, you know, you fly on the weekends just to keep current in your time, and they had these old Hiller helicopters, and I wanted to take this song to John, and couldn't think of a more impressive way than, you know how his house used to be before they built the top part on it. The lawn kind of went out over the roof.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I landed just about on his roof with the helicopter. Now, actually, he wasn't there. I scared everybody else in the place to death. They thought they had been busted, but they were impressed and gave him the tape.
What was the song?
Well, he said it was Sunday Morning Coming Down. I don't remember. I really don't, which song it was.
But you'd already met him.
Oh, I'd met him at Columbia in the studios, and I'd give him every song that I had. I'm sure he has somewhere a closet full of tapes that I've given him, you know, that he either did or didn't listen to, you know. But I'd give him every song that I wrote all the time, just hoping he'd do one. And he claims that's one he did.
Did they call the police when you tried to land the helicopter on the house?
Was that the story?
No, no, I'm just curious.
No, they came up with real concerned. They saw it was just old Kris, and I think he thought I was a little crazy anyway. But that part of it's true anyway.
Kris, I want to talk about Sunday morning coming down. Now we're taping this show at the Combine Music Complex, for whom you write. We're right in the heart of what is called Record Row, and I know you used to live around here someplace. You had an apartment.
Right across the alleyway there. I think it was condemned. It looks like they've rebuilt the place. Right next to, remember Kathy Gregory?
Yes.
And Bobby Gregory?
Yes.
Right next to them. And
you had an apartment or a room?
Apartment. That's a euphemism. I think it's, it had holes in the wall and a dirt floor on the second floor. But in fact, I just quit paying rent on the darn thing a year ago. November.
You mean you've had it all this time?
Mm-hmm. Well, Kathy was afraid that if I moved out, some hippie would move in. I don't know what she thought I was, So and she says, that's your good luck, whatever it was. I kept it until Francis Preston told me that Kathy didn't even live there anymore. I've been paying rent for a year and a half for nothing. But it was a pretty scary place. I don't know how in the world I lived there for a year and a half.
Is that where you wrote Sunday Morning Coming Down?
Yeah.
Because the song has always reminded me of maybe what Record Row would look like on Christmas morning, or any time when it's when nothing is going on, and it's absolutely vacant down here. And I got to thinking that it must have been a very lonesome time for you.
Well, it was. I had separated from my family, from Fran and Tracy and my son, and Sundays were just like that, really. Sunday and Christmas and all that. But nobody's working. You couldn't wait for Monday in those days, and the bars didn't even open. Tally Ho Tavern was across the corner, and it didn't open till 1. I guess it was a lonesome time. It's hard to remember being lonesome now when you can't find any time to be alone anymore. But no, that's not true either.
All right, the Tally Ho Tavern was down here on the corner, a little bar, and it has since been destroyed or torn down. I know Tom T. Hall came in and salvaged some bricks from it. He has some bricks from the tavern.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah, he used to go in there and drink a beer or two.
Weren't you a bartender there?
Yeah. Glenda Brown and Jim Brown gave me, that was when I left Columbia. Harold Hitt and I had a disagreement about my job, and
so now you've left your janitor's job at Columbia Records.
Yeah, and went to work for I think $60 a week, tending bar at the Tally Ho.
So you're still just hanging on.
Well, it wasn't a great step up. No, it was enough to keep feeding the family. I wasn't making any money at all, and it was during the time I was working there that my wife and I decided to separate, and also she got pregnant, and I knew I needed to make some more money, so I went with a friend that I'd met in the National Guard and got a job out in the Gulf of Mexico flying the helicopters, because it made more money than the...
what would you fly in the helicopters?
Men and equipment around to the platforms. There was much 50 miles out, out to sea out there.
The way the wind blows out in the Gulf of Mexico. Years ago, I used to work at Baton Rouge.
Oh, yeah.
And I know the way the wind blows down there. It must have been pretty hairy to land a helicopter on an oil rig.
They just wrecked one a couple nights ago, I heard. He out there landed and missed the platform. But it was hairy. But you could never fly at night because they didn't have the equipment in the aircraft. But the weather was very changeable. And mainly it was lonesome. You talk about lonesome. It was just like prison, but they didn't lock the doors. They didn't have any wine, women, or song. And it was 7 days at a time. And you're 50 miles away from land, let alone whatever is going for you in Nashville, So I couldn't wait to get back to Nashville every week.
Kris, at what point did you finally leave Nashville?
Well,
What was happening to you? What made you finally leave here?
it was going on the road. Just when I quit my job. It's hard to believe. 10 years to the day from when I started this movie I was just talking about with Chimino. April 15th, 1969, I came back here and John was doing that TV show.
The Johnny Cash show.
Yeah, and never did get another job after that because Fred Foster and Bob Beckham financed me so I wouldn't get thrown in jail for non-support. Because I hung around that show with Mickey Newberry and pitched a lot of songs to the artists that were coming through, and like Roger cut by McGee, Roger Miller.
I heard a story the other day that you went out and gave Roger Miller Bobby McGee and really upset the people at Monument Records because they wanted you to record that.
Well, that's possible. I don't know. I think, in fact, it's true because I had already given away a Sunday Morning Coming Down to Ray Stevens. And it was sort of like, well, what are you doing to us? Fred had been waiting to record me for a while. And I don't know. I was so thrilled that Roger wanted to do it, I just gave it to him.
Kris, what did you think about Kris Kristofferson making records back in those days?
I don't think I had any idea that they'd ever sell. I didn't have the faith in them that Fred did. He wanted me to do an album, and we worked a long time at it. Then finally we did do it. I figured it would be a good demo for if nothing else, and it turned out to be because there was 4 of the songs on it that got covered and were hits, like For the Good Times and Sunday Morning Coming Down by McGee and Help Me Make It Through the Night.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really when I moved away from Nashville, though, because I sort of went out and started to do just a couple of places, to promote the record, like the Troubadour in L.A. when the record was going to be in L.A. and it never stopped. Before I finished that job, I had an offer of another one, and then the next thing you know, I was on the road for about 7 or 8 years, and I didn't really move anywhere until Rita was pregnant with Casey, and we decided we needed a house, and she bought one out in Malibu.
All right, let me clear up a point that might confuse some of our listeners. You've been married twice.
Right.
You were married to a pretty little girl I used to know here in Nashville.
Yeah, Fran.
Yeah. And you had a child,
Tracy.
And
son Kris was born right when they were leaving.
All right. And then that marriage, unfortunately, dissolved.
Right.
And then later on you meet you meet Rita, and the two of you get married.
Yeah.
And you have a little girl.
Right. I just saw the first family when Willie and I played in Palo Alto, and I spent a couple days with them. And we're a lot closer now than we were when I was married to her.
Years ago in Nashville, and I hate to keep saying years ago, but there were some choice times. I know Larry Gatlin has said to me many times, I wish I had lived here in Nashville during that period. It really bugs him that he wasn't here when Roger was here, Roger Miller,
Mm-hmm.
and Willie was living here, and you were here. And Larry has said those must have been great years.
They were great years.
And
I wasn't here when Roger was here.
I know.
Though.
You came along later. Roger and Willie were here in the early 60s.
Uh-huh.
Roger was playing fiddle and hanging out.
Yeah.
And Willie was fronting the Ray Price band.
Yeah.
And
but it was an exciting time because
it was a very productive time. A lot of hits came out of that era.
And there were a lot of interesting writers that hung out that weren't really famous then, and you would get to know the stars, because you could go out and drink with them and everything, or hang around them. I don't say you were really friends with them, but there were people like Red Lane and Jimmy Day and people like this who knew the stars, who knew the stars, and they were good writers, and we'd hang around and swap stuff.
Kris, I seem to recall that one of the first songs, other than Vietnam Blues, which Jack Sanders did.
Right, he did the first thing. Then
Yeah.
Dave Dudley had
I had a chance to record that one time and did not return Mary John's call soon enough, and she gave it to somebody else. And I really got upset. I did one of your songs in the early part of your career.
Late Night Morning Sidewalks.
Yeah.
Right.
I wondered if you remember that.
I like that.
It was terrible.
You're the only one who ever did. What do you mean it was terrible?
It was terrible.
Well, a couple of those and we can retire.
Recently, I know what I was going to say.
It was terrible.
It was all I could do to carry the melody. But,
the melody was pretty weird when you think about it. It was all I could do to carry it, too.
I recorded that for ABC Records.
Yeah, but nobody held a gun to your head. I can't feel guilty about it.
But it seems to me the first song that you had recorded that did anything was Jody and the Kids.
I think so, right. Roy Drusky.
And then after that came a whole flock of good things. Recently, Willie Nelson did a tribute to you.
Oh, boy, that helped.
And what do you mean, oh, boy, that helped? You're not destitute anymore, are you?
Well, no, I'm not. I mean, I don't need to work. It's not like what it helped was is so many people have come to forget that I'm a songwriter. That I mean, they act like I haven't done a thing with music since the Silver Tongue Devil album, which was back in 1971, and I've been on the road playing more than I have done movies. I've spent more time with music, but the impression that most people seem to have is that I just went off and beat a movie star and forgot all about the writing. And I think Willie's record made a lot of people aware that I'm a writer that weren't ever aware of it. God, it's been 10 years or something.
Mm-hmm.
But and he's so hot right now.
I would imagine that would be a way to make a few dollars, to have Willie Nelson record your song.
Can you imagine? It was funny. Somebody sent me. It turned out it wasn't Willie at all, but it was a guy who signed his name Willie to a telegram that I got up in Montana this summer. It said, in my continuing efforts to revive your sagging career, I have come up with a script for you to do with me, and he signed it like it was Willie. But the guy who wrote it didn't even know that Willie was doing this album for me. I sent it to Willie to show him that he was reviving my sagging career. But it really did help, and it helped going out with him this time, too. Because it'd been a long time, it'd been a year since I'd worked. You
did a 12-day tour with him, didn't you?
It was about 3 weeks it ended up being. But I'd not worked at all in a year with the music, and I hadn't worked by myself, without the old lady along for as long as I could remember, at least 6 years.
You appeared in so many movies, and I think this is the reason that people forgot that you were also a singer-songwriter.
Yeah, well, I was
what's a typical year for you? How many movies, how many concerts, that sort of thing?
Boy, I haven't got figures. I just know that I was working all the time. I would often do concerts on the weekends if I had weekends when I was doing a film. And as soon as the film was over, we'd go on the road. And then we'd go on the road until a film started. So I was doing one or the other all year long. At the most two, the most films I did in a row was Vigilante Force, a terrible thing I did, and The Sailor right after that, and then The Stars Born right after that. They were back to back. Then I went out on the road until I did Semi-Tough. And then I did, after Semi-Tough, I went on the road until I did Convoy, and I went on the road during Convoy. And all this time I was drying out. Right before Semi-Tough, I quit drinking, toward the whole summer of, I worked, I guess, right up to the point where took that 6-month movie up in Montana last year.
Kris, I gather that you are very much in demand in Hollywood. Is it a long way from Hollywood to Hollywood from 16th Avenue South here in Nashville?
It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable to me that I'm sitting here talking with you like this right now. You know, if you think back that it was only like how many years ago that we were having a coffee at 4 o'clock in the morning at your place over there at WSM, and Hollywood was out. It wasn't even in the plans in the movies.
How were you discovered for pictures?
From performing, you know, like when I went out to work and promote that first album. For some reason, we started getting offers as soon as I was working at the Troubadour there. And I think I started performing in June of '70, and I started my first movie at the 1st of November that same year. So it was just a matter of months after I started performing.
I assume one successful performance begets another successful performance in a movie.
I think they were just hungry. I don't know. It was the timing was right or something. It was, yeah. I think the movie did me more good than it did well commercially or anything. You know, because a lot of casting directors and stuff saw the film and got me into the next couple of films that I did, like the one with Sam Peckinpah, the Pat Garrett one, and Bloom and Love. I got them off on the strength of the first film. But the first film I had to do a screen test for.
Didn't you play Billy the Kid one time?
Yeah, that was the Peckinpah one. I did. That was the third movie I did. I just saw that the other night. When we were playing at Tahoe, they had it on up there.
You've done a little bit of everything. Boxer, Rhodes Scholar, football player, actor, writer, singer.
I'm an old man.
Semi-Tough must have been a fun picture since you were an old football player.
It was. But I got all my dreams of returning to action were wiped right out. I had 3 broken ribs. I had a broken finger, 2 broken toes, a torn hamstring, a Charlie horse. They were trying not to hurt me. And this was happening. It was incredible. I had no illusions that I could get out there and be Fred Biletnikoff or anything anymore.
Tell me, if I'm fishing here, okay? A funny story about making the picture A Star Is Born, something that got screwed up.
Well, there's. Do you know you remember the scene where we're at the piano? It's like the first time we get together. She's playing the thing, and I come down and I'm trying to put the make on her. So I say, "Hey, that sounds good," you know, and I give her some words to it, you know. And next thing you know, I sit down next to her and she's playing, and I'm singing.
In the picture, you are In the picture, you are the big singing star.
Yeah,
and she is the nobody.
Yeah, and she's writing songs, and I've got her out of my house, and it was this big mansion, and she was sitting at the piano playing this melody, and I went down, and I ended up sitting on the piano bench with her, and she says, "God, that's beautiful," you know, the words that I put to her song or something, and we end up kissing. I'm supposed to pick her up, you know, in this very old-timey romantic way, you know, and we sort of move off across the room into a bunch of pile of cushions or something over there where we're going to have a making love. And have you ever tried to pick somebody up when you're sitting down at a piano? It's not the easiest thing in the world to move smoothly from a kiss without breaking your stride, you know. And what I did was, as I picked her up, first thing, I swung her feet around and cleaned everything off the top of the piano. There were glasses crashing on the ground and everything, and nobody yelled cut. So I turned, and my foot got caught in one of the cables they had lights strung at different intervals throughout this room. And I just kept going because nobody yelled cut, and I'm carrying Barbara, and I can hear the lights falling over, popping, you know, one after another, crashing as I'm going farther. I guess the director was laughing so hard he couldn't say cut. And then I got to the other side and dropped her. I've never seen it, but they must have some real neat film somewhere on that. There were some other times that were fairly funny. But I've some of them I don't want to even bring back up.
How did Barbara react to this? Did she start laughing?
Yeah, she was a good sport. I tell you, she did a thing one time that really surprised me. It was near the end of the film, and everybody looked like they had been on the Bataan Death March. I mean, it was down in Arizona where they had that house that was supposed to be in the country, that we built for ourselves, and Barbara had this real white frilly costume that had got. There was a scene where she ran out, and I was doing something destructive on a motorcycle in the mud, and we rolled around in the mud, and she got dirty. Well, she only had 2 costumes, and she'd blown that one on that. And then we didn't shoot the inside, the follow-up to it, till later. And so she came out, and the guy came up with a bucket of the mud, to spread mud on this thing, and God, I can't say it on the air, but she said, "This smells like."
We can use our imagination.
Okay. Well, then I thought she was just, exaggerating. She said, "Come here, smell it," and it did. And they claimed that it was some way that this chemical that they use for dirt had aged or something, and it ended up smelling like a bucket of manure or worse, And so I went to tell the director, I says, "They're putting blank bleep or whatever on your star over there." And he's wandering around that circular house, and I'm walking around saying, "Frank, I'm serious. They're putting bleep on Barbara." And and the whole crew could see me doing this. They're all dying, and he turned and looked down at me. He says, "I don't want to know about it." And I looked at Barbara, and she started laughing so hard I couldn't believe it. We were doing the scene later, and she'd pull away, and she'd say, "Frank, I can see it in his eyes when the smell hits him. I can't do it." But she could have really thrown a tantrum, and she took it real well. I don't think I would have taken it as well.
Is Barbra Streisand known to throw tantrums?
I don't think throw tantrum was the right word. I think, but she could have really have gotten mad, and she's very expressive. She doesn't conceal her feelings, no. But in this instance, she went with it. There was nothing to do.
Well, I didn't see the picture. You did a picture about the sea.
The sailor who fell from grace with the sea, yeah.
Did this have a lot of nudity?
Yeah. It was, that was all that got publicity from it, but it was based on a novel by this Japanese author, Mishima, who was a pretty bizarre character and had some weird philosophy, but the script was really good. It was written by this Lou Carlino, who directed it, and it was beautifully photographed. And it was about a sailor who ends up falling in love with this widow, and gets involved with her and her son, and the son and these weird school kids do him in because they believe the sailor should be back out in the sea. That's an oversimplified version of it, but the script was a beautiful script. It did have a lot of nudity in it, and it wasn't seen by a lot of people because it wasn't. It was a low-budget picture, and it wasn't distributed. So all anybody knew about it was the nudity, I think, by the end of it, because of the Playboy pictures and stuff that they had run in it.
Kris, who would you like to make a picture with?
Who would I like to make a picture with? Directors or actors?
Actresses.
Actresses?
Or actors.
Oh, I'd like to make I would probably say actresses first, but, there's a bunch of them, like Jane Fonda, and there are a whole lot of people that I would like to do films with. I mentioned Jane because I just seen her, and Diane Cannon and I were going to do a comedy, and it didn't work out. She's real funny. I would like to do that. I'd like to work with Michael again, Cimino, because he's a real good director. And someday I may work with Sam again if we get to the right place. I really am taking it one thing at a time now. The next thing that I know about is the thing that I might do with Willie, which is a pretty funny script that he's got.
What is that?
Well, it's a script that he's had for some time. I think he wrote it with Bud Shrake, and it's not the music business as I knew it, but it's the one that he knew, and that was just a little bit ahead of me, But it's a real good script and funny, and since our bands and crews and everything got along so good on this last tour, I think it'd be a natural to do the film. And a song track, the track of it ought to at least sell.
Now Willie has done. He was in The Electric Horseman with Robert Redford.
Did you see that?
Haven't seen that.
It's good.
I know he did a picture in Austin.
Honeysuckle Rose.
Honeysuckle Rose.
Yeah. I'm interested to see that one.
And I get the impression Willie wants to expand his horizons.
Well, he's always been interested in films. He's talked to me about them for a long time, and I think he was just waiting until the right thing came along. And then Redford gave him a real good way to find out whether he liked it or not. I remember he came when I was doing Semi-Tough, and sat in the trailer one day while I sat there terrified, and it was right after The Star Is Born, and people were shaking the trailer and screaming and going nuts. And at the end of it, Willie says, "I don't think I'll be in the movies." But then I remember when Robert Redford offered him this part in the Horseman, it was a real good way to find out if he liked it or not, because the burden of carrying the film was not on him, and they get along good, and he really did a good job in it. In the Horseman.
How do you handle mobs when people are
not as well as he does? I'll tell you.
People are screaming to see you, and they get a chance to come face to face with you, and I assume they want to pull at your clothes, and I've never forgotten. Years ago, I worked with Bobby Vinton on the road when he had Roses Are Red, and I saw 3 girls almost kill him. I mean, they got him up against a concrete post and just about beat him to death. And I thought, boy, this is a tough business. Has that sort of thing happened to you?
I didn't almost get killed, but I've almost gone crazy. Just from well, you can't go anywhere. I mean, everybody comes up and interrupts you no matter what you're doing. Like we went to see. The first night on the tour in Amarillo with Willie and I and the bands, went over to this club where Billy Joe Shaver was playing with his band. And it was like a scene straight out of The Star Is Born, where she said, "You're blowing my act," at the beginning of the movie. We walked in, and I hadn't seen Billy Joe in years, and he was really sounding good up there. And I didn't hear anything after the first lick of music, because people were coming up. They'd grab my jacket and say, "What are you wearing that for?" And some old girl would grab my beard and say, "Is the beard real?" and yank on it. I mean, I felt like a public toilet. I said, "Willie, they're writing on my walls. Let me out of here." And he can just sit there and shine it on and sign autographs all night long. He's like Muhammad Ali or like Burt Reynolds or something. But it put me under the table. I had to leave right away.
Do you find it difficult to go out to, say, a restaurant?
It depends on where it is. Back home, and one of the reasons that it's more comfortable in Malibu is that there are so many stars you don't get much attention.
How about the tourist?
I guess most of the people out there aren't tourists. I don't know. I just don't seem to have the problem there as say I did in Natchez, Mississippi, when I was working with Muhammad. Of course, when you're around Muhammad, you're in trouble anyway, because everybody in the world wants his autograph. And
what did you do with Muhammad Ali?
We did a made-for-television film. It was based on a Howard Fast novel called Freedom Road. I mainly did it just as a friendship thing with Muhammad. He wanted me to be in it.
You didn't have to fight him, did you?
No way.
Show him what a good boxer you used to be.
Are you kidding me? No, he's really a good person. But it's like jogging with Willie, though. You don't jog a lot. You got every time somebody comes up with a pencil and a paper, you're going to have to stop. And Muhammad wouldn't pass up anybody who wants an autograph, because he remembers when he was a kid how much it meant. To see the tree that Joe Louis leaned against in Louisville, and Willie, my guy, we were jogging someplace, I forget where it was, and these people hollered for an autograph, and then they had to go inside and get a pen and paper and everything. You're standing there freezing, and the sweat's drying and everything. The guy comes out and says, "You don't mind doing this?" I says, "I mind the hell out of it. That so-and-so doesn't." He doesn't mind it.
Do you sign autographs? Do you
Sure.
Do you find a situation in which you will do that?
Oh, I sign them anytime I can because I feel so damn guilty if I don't. But the trouble is, a lot of time you're hanging up everybody. You know, the everybody who's waiting on you, and as soon as two or three people see you're doing it, then like if you're in a hotel lobby or an airport or something like that, more people start coming. They don't even know who you are, you know, and they just want to get whatever they're giving away there.
All right, I want you to tell these folks what you did last night here in Nashville. I think you had a lot of fun.
I did. I had a ball. I went over with Pete Drake and sang on an Ernest Tubb record, sang harmony with him and alternated verses, and it was I was so knocked out because I couldn't help but think back to when I used to listen to him, like in Brownsville, Texas, you know, back in the Second World War.
You were an Ernest Tubb fan then?
Oh yeah. Well, at least I could sing like Ernest, you know. I couldn't sing like George Jones or something, but it was really a thrill. It was just like what we were talking about before, about it being a long way from where we were 10 years ago to Hollywood or something. Thinking of that anybody'd even ask me to sing on a record with Ernest Tubb, you know, it was incredible. And
what'd you do?
Letters Have No Arms. It's you know, I feel great, and I'm going to be tonight. I'll be singing with Hank Jr. You know, and asked by them to sing some Hank Williams songs. I mean, this is incredible to me. If you think back about it, it's a little incredible.
There are not a lot of people in Hollywood who could do that.
Well, there are not a lot of people who were a janitor who even get the chance to do it. You know, do you remember? I mean, the first time I was on TV was on your show. I had to ask permission to leave Columbia.
That's right.
And came over and played the guitar.
I used to have an afternoon television show in Nashville about 4 o'clock or 4:30.
Yeah.
And in order to be there, you had to come out and rehearse. Not a lot, but a little.
Yeah.
And you did have to leave.
And you had a studio band there?
Yeah.
And Charlie Leuven was on, I remember, and he came up and told me to take a cigarette out of my fingers. I was sitting there beating that old 12-string and with a cigarette in my hand. But it's such a big jump to go from there to, I mean, that was you just did that because I think because you liked the songs that I'd written, you know, because God knows I couldn't get arrested.
You mean singing?
Yes.
Yeah, Kris, I have to be honest. I didn't think you were
Let's don't be honest. Let's
But you know what? How I compensated, the girls all loved Kris, and he really looked great. And I figured, well, they won't pay attention to the singing.
Oh, is that it? Oh boy, that's terrific. One way or another, I get on there. But to go from that from where I'm scared to death to go out and be on the show with somebody that I knew and everything, to be asked to be on a special that's about one of your biggest heroes, you know. It's almost like a dream. And then the night before that, you're singing on an Ernest Tubb record, you know. I'm sure I'm going to wake up and somebody's going to say, hey, Studio A is filthy, you know. A lot of people think that I'm still drinking, or that I fight a lot. Well, I don't know where the heck that come from, because I never have fought since I came to Nashville. Except me and Farron wrestled around one night, but hell, everybody fights with Farron.
How long have you been on the wagon?
It was 3 years in September.
Why did you,
3.5.
Why did you make that decision?
I think there were a lot of reasons at the same time, but the main one was probably that I wanted to watch my little girl grow up, and I think it was right out. I saw the rough cut of The Star Is Born. That was kind of looked a little prophetic. I also saw a television thing I'd done with Geraldo Rivera. He came by to some concert I was doing for Cesar Chavez, which was at the end of a tour, and he filmed it, and I was real drunk, and I had to watch the interview in a sober light of day, you know, and that wasn't too pleasant an experience. And I think Casey was probably the biggest reason. So I quit, and I doubt if I have no eyes to ever drink again. Just
Would it
I
be?
drank so much though, Ralph. Remember you? You remember how much I used to drink,
Yeah.
even out there at WSM, you know. And God,
I'll tell you, all I remember is you used to have beer in your hand a lot.
Mm-hmm. Well,
That was about the extent of it.
well, by the time I quit, I was drinking probably a bottle and a half of whiskey, in addition to all the beer I'd be drinking a day. And if I was working, I know I'd finish a bottle of Jack Daniels before I'd get on stage.
How about
And,
how about when the movies would come up? You couldn't work and be drunk.
Well, I was working like on The Star Is Born. They had a half a gallon of gold tequila that they kept full in my icebox, and the icebox was full of beer. And I don't know how much I drank of that, but I was drinking all the time.
Isn't it difficult to deliver the lines when you're?
Well, if you're used to doing that all the time, I guess it isn't. I should think it probably did end up affecting my behavior, you know, and it probably messed up some of my performances. I never thought it was interfering with my work. I thought it was what it was allowing me to do my work, you know what I mean? I was so scared, like to get on stage or something, or to go out and act with Barbra Streisand, you know?
You know, you have mentioned this a lot of times. You used to mention it to you when I knew you in Nashville. Mentioned to me you were scared.
Mm-hmm.
And then, you know, after a while, we automatically assume a guy like you becomes a veteran and he overcomes all this, that you no longer have reason to be scared. And you've worked with Streisand, you've worked with Burt Reynolds and Muhammad Ali and so many people. Are you still scared?
Aren't you?
It depends on what I'm doing. I suppose there would be moments when I would be uptight.
Yeah.
I can't think of anything that would scare me. But you see, I haven't been to the plateaus you have been.
Well, and
I suppose if I had to suddenly go into a movie with Barbra Streisand, it would scare the hell out of me.
yeah. Well, I remember you were scared when you had my record. Of course, you were entitled to with my record at that time.
I
No.
had no confidence in my singing. Yeah, I was scared to death to record.
Well, I'd say those kind of things don't leave you, really. Because I am still scared. But I noticed also that Johnny Cash was scared last week when we came in and taped his special. I guess it was a week ago.
The
you know,
25th anniversary
25th,
show.
yeah.
He was scared.
Well, he was shaking. Yeah, he was nervous. And I saw it one time backstage at the Hollywood Bowl, and I remember I thought the same thing you were thinking. I was thinking, God Almighty, you mean you don't ever get over it? You know, he was announcing Carl Perkins from backstage, and he was so nervous. You know, I could see his hand shaking. You know, and this wasn't when he was on pills. So that
Johnny
wasn't why he
Cash
was
has
doing it.
always been nervous.
Yeah, but I mean, he was scared. I think it's scary to get out in front of people. I read somewhere where that's the scariest thing for people to do. They fear it more than death and heights in the dark, deep water and stuff like that.
I think I'm going to carry this a step further.
Uh-huh.
I think that most entertainers who are veterans are more scared of their peers than they are of the audience. They're afraid they'll screw up in front of another great entertainer.
Oh, that's probably true. I know I was the scaredest when I came back to Nashville about a year ago and did a show here. I worked myself into a whole psychosomatic sickness. I couldn't even leave the room. And it's silly because they're on your side. You know,
Sure,
friends.
your peers understand.
If they don't, nobody does.
I want to ask you about one more song that we did not discuss. I want you to tell me about the writing of For the Good Times.
Well, I wrote that on the way. That was when I started working in the Gulf of Mexico. I was driving between here and New Orleans, or Morgan City actually, and I wrote that in that old. I had an old Opel that didn't have a radio in it, and was feeling that way, and wrote the song. I remember. I think I was just leaving Birmingham. You know, where it used to get real dark when you left Birmingham going south to New Orleans. And the thing started coming to me. And I remember I couldn't wait to get down to Morgan City where my guitar was to see if I could play the chords to it, to the melody that was going in my head. But it was straight expression of what I was going through at the time. I didn't
What
write
were you
it.
going through?
Well,
at the time?
Something was over,
Mm-hmm.
and it was sad. I think like the first verse and the chorus came right away, and then I probably had to wait a few months till I got the right second chorus on it. And I still think it holds up. I knew it was a song that would be a hit. I thought that it would be not a hit, but would be recorded. It might be after my death or something, but I knew someday somebody's going to say it's a good song. It wasn't like Once More with Feeling, which was a hit because of Jerry Lee Lewis sang it. The song itself ain't that much, but he brings that little extra dimension to the thing and made it a hit. But I thought that For the Good Times stood on its own. Nobody else did for a long time, but for I guess about 3 years. But it's turned out to be a real, at least for me, it's my only BMI award for several years now.
I'm going to put you on the spot. Examining recordings of your songs by other people, is there one that stands out in your mind as your favorite?
Boy, that does put you on the spot because it would be a lot easier to say try and find one that you don't like, and that's real rare. Usually, I'm still enough of a Nashville songwriter that it knocks me out anybody who's cutting my song. But I would say there are different reasons that make them special to you. Like when somebody like Johnny Cash did Sunday Morning Coming Down, and it got to be a record of award winner. It was real special, and Ray Stevens's version of the same song was special because it was the most trouble anybody had taken with a song of mine. He really worked hard on it. And when I think Jerry Lee Lewis, when he did that, it was the biggest surprise to me when he cut Once More with Feeling. It was probably the first time I'd seen somebody take something and make it better than it was. Something that you didn't even imagine.
Mm-hmm.
And George Jones singing "Why Me" knocks me out. The only reason I hate to say it is I know I'm going to leave out somebody that it's going to hurt their feelings.
Okay, all right. Tell me about Why Me, Lord. Were you having some sort of religious experience in your life?
I never in the world thought that would be a hit record. That was straight personal feelings. And I wrote it very fast. Matter of fact, it was after you remember when Connie Smith and I come out to your show she took me to church.
I remember you were going to church with Connie Smith.
Yeah, well, I heard Larry Gatlin singing "Help Me"
Mm-hmm.
for the first time.
Was he at church?
He was at church, and he was. I guess in some churches they have a guy sitting on a stool singing a song. All I know is that at one point it was Jimmy Snow's church out there,
Mm-hmm. Was this the night that you went with Connie Smith? That you heard Larry Gatlin?
This was the day that I went with Connie Smith that I heard Larry Gatlin. He's part of the service, I guess, or something. He's singing this song, which I had never heard, called "Help Me." And it blew me away.
So "Help Me" was the catalyst for
Yes.
Why Me, Lord?
"Help Me" was the catalyst for whatever went down that happened to me that day that I can't, that I don't even want to try to describe now because I'm a little embarrassed about talking about religion because
Okay.
I feel like what I can express about it I can do best in a song. rather
Well,
than
religion
talking
is very
about it.
personal.
Yeah. But it's also like a lot of people like to talk about it. People come up all the time want to talk about Jesus and want to talk about Christ, Christianity, church, and I feel if I've got anything to communicate about it, that I formulated well enough, it'll come out in some work of art that I do.
Mm-hmm.
But I can't talk easily about it.
I wonder if Michelangelo felt the same way.
Well, I think it's a long way from the Sistine Chapel to "Why Me, Lord."
Kris, I thank you for being our guest in Nashville. We are very proud of you. John Loudermilk no longer lives here, but he once said that he thought you were the greatest talent to ever come out of this town.
John did.
And a lot of us admire you, and we'll watch for you in the movies.
You saved that to bring me to my knees at the end. Holy smoke. Well, I don't know what to say to that.
Just say goodbye.
I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.